Hi, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. I'm Rachel Mackenzie, VP of Consumer Marketing at Coursera, and I am so honored today to be moderating this conversation on a topic very close to my heart, gender equity in education. In the past year, the number of women dropping out of the labor force in the US was 4 times higher than that of men. Projections from Mackenzie and Oxford Economics suggest that employment for women may not recover to pre-pandemic levels until 2024, 2 full years after a recovery for men. At the same time, Coursera's recent Global Skills Report, looking at online learning trends on our platform over the past year, shows that women have started learning online at higher rates than men, both overall and in online STEM classes in particular. There's an incredible opportunity now for all people, and women in particular, to upskill and rebound in the labor force with higher education. Brooke Elliott and Quentin McAndrew are 2 exceptional women who I've been honored to have the privilege of working with during my 6 years at Coursera. And they lead and have helped shape a really groundbreaking set of online degrees. For Brooke, the IMBA, IMSA, and IMSM from the Geese College of Business at University of Illinois. And for Quentin, the CU Boulder Masters of Electrical Engineering and Masters of Data Science. Before we start with introductions, all of our attendees, we'd love to hear where you're logging in from today. We expect a number of you from the US, where the 3 of us are based, but also we know that our learning is a global need. So please, team, if we can get the first poll going, we'd love to hear where you're from. I'm seeing Egypt, India, Sri Lanka, Minnesota, someone at 1 a.m. Amazing. We are so glad you're here. We are so Saudi Arabia, Russia. This is fantastic. We are so glad you're all here. We are so excited to engage on this topic. So Quentin and Brooke, would you tell us a little bit more about yourselves, the professional journeys that led you to your current role, and a little bit about yourselves as people outside of work? Brooke, should we start with you?
Sure. Yes, thanks, Rachel, and thanks everyone for joining us today. So my name is Brooke Elliott. I'm an associate dean in the Geese College of Business, and as Rachel mentioned, I have the privilege of leading the online strategy for our college, and it includes 3 full degrees partnered with Coursera. So the IMBA, IMSA, and IMSM. A little bit about my background. I have an undergrad and an MBA from Indiana University. My PhD is from the University of Washington. I'm an accounting academic by trade, which I know sounds maybe really, really boring, but it's actually quite exciting. But I always say a higher education administrator by choice. I love the role that I'm in. I love being on the edge of changing trends in education and shaping those trends and innovations. A little bit about me outside. I'm married to a bank CEO, 2 accountants, so an exciting house. I have 2 kids. Aiden and Callan. Aiden's 14, Callan is 10. They play a ton of travel sports. We're all over. My son's a good boy, and my daughter's a very challenging girl. So that's just a little bit about me outside of my profession. Quentin?
Hi, everybody. Excuse me. Thank you so much for joining. I'm Quentin McAndrew, Assistant Vice Provost and Executive Director of Academic and Learning Innovation at the University of Colorado Boulder. And as Rachel so clearly stated, we have 2 degrees on Coursera, a Master's of Science in Electrical Engineering and a Master's of Science in Data Science. And my journey has been long and winding and very inflected by my identity as a woman and as a mother and as a professional. So I have my undergraduate degree, a master's degree in English from Stanford University. I went into private business for a publisher. I was an editor, then I ran new product development, and then I did new business development, became a mother, started working part-time, became a business consultant, and then became a stay-at-home mom in London. So shout out to everybody from London who's on the call. And then I was having coffee with a friend one day, and she said, "Why didn't you ever go back for your PhD?" And I thought that's a great idea with young children. And so I embarked on that journey and got a PhD in 19th century copyright law in American literature. And a job opened up at Boulder as I was graduating developing new academic programs, and it blended my new academic background, has nothing to do with 19th century copyright law or American literature, and my business background. And I've gotten to have this amazing career sort of coming off the so-called mommy track at the forefront of academic innovation. And I've been a partner on Coursera. I have a course on Coursera. I teach a business writing course, and have just been so blessed to be a part of this entire journey, bringing education to people like all of you around the world. Oh, and outside of work, I'm a mom. I have 2 daughters. They are full of sarcasm and back talk and strong personalities, which is exactly how I hoped to raise them. One is 23 in graduate school in London at UCL. You might find her at the Lord Nelson, having a beer now that things have opened up a little bit more. And my younger daughter is 21 and getting a master's in marketing analytics at CU Boulder.
I love hearing, I think so often in work and in life, we don't ask people about the journeys that they've taken. And it's so fantastic to hear about the different paths that that people take through life. Quentin, you and I have known each other for a while, and I didn't even know all of that story. So let's talk a little bit more about the online degree programs that you mentioned, because these programs are each groundbreaking in a number of ways. Can you tell our audience a little bit more about the programs you helped develop and what makes them unique? Brooke, do you want to?
Sure. Yeah, I can start. Yeah, positively. Yeah, so in 2016, we launched our first online graduate program, the IMBA, in partnership with Coursera, and it really was disruptive in the graduate education space in a few different ways. It was one of the first stackable degrees, and that's something that we developed in partnership with Coursera, where each of our credit-bearing courses have a MOOC component, but learners could begin in the MOOC, explore our content, get to know our faculty, get to know the quality of the content that we developed, and then choose to take those learnings and the credit they'd earned through those MOOCs and apply it towards our degree courses and our degree program. So it was the first, I think, really stackable online graduate business degree. The other thing that I think really differentiated was flexibility. So flexibility and affordability. I mean, we offer an MBA from a Research One, great university, outstanding college of business at just under $23,000. It's flexible, meaning our courses run on 8-week terms. We now have 5 intake cycles, so you can start 5 times a year. You take a 4 credit hour course in one 8-week term. Some students choose to take more than that. Again, that comes in with the flexibility. And there's also an option to pause. When we thought about designing this program, it was designed for working professionals. We thought about working women who were professionals and then had responsibilities a lot of times at home and taking care of kids. And sometimes you can, you're ready to enroll in an 8-week term, but you need to take 8 weeks off, or maybe you need to take 16 weeks off, or maybe 32 weeks off. And traditional programs didn't allow you to do that without being made to feel that you were off track or you weren't progressing in the way that you should. And so our curriculum was really designed with that flexibility in mind, with that working professional in mind, with someone who might be a caregiver in mind. And then the last thing I'll say is it was also, we talk about a career curated curriculum. So it was really designed to provide individuals in the workforce with the skills that they needed to maybe make a career pivot, or maybe they're going to stay in the same career, but they're looking for a promotion, but they wanted job ready skills. And so I think it was an innovative way to think about stackability so that you could try education, flexibility so that it meets your needs, and then skills-based education so it allows you to obtain the outcomes that you're looking to obtain.
I'm just sitting here nodding and nodding because Brooke and I share so many of the same philosophies and mission about access, affordability, and empowerment of our students. And so the degrees at Boulder are built in many of the same ways. Students can start in non-credit content on the platform, and all of your work will transfer into the 4-credit experience. So just as Brooke was saying, students can try it out, make sure that they're comfortable with the content, with the format. We have the same kinds of flexibility and stackability We also designed our degrees to be a 4-credit experience curated by the needs of the student. So I think traditional education, we tend to think of ourselves as the experts. And what we really want to do is ask our students and give our students the flexibility and autonomy to design the program that suits their needs. And so you can come into Boulder's 4-credit experiences just to earn credit if you want to upskill or make a pivot in your career, or you can earn a graduate certificate, and all of our graduate certificates then stack immediately to the degree. And similar again to Brooke's. And I hope everyone's getting this sense of collegiality. I mean, it's a little bit of an ironic word, but we work together, we share missions, and we really believe in what we're delivering to the world. And it's just so fun to be a part of this collaboration. Our degrees at Boulder also have a particularly, I think, a unique feature that's geared towards women. We all know that in spite of our best intentions, applications, standardized tests, even letters of recommendations, even our names, carry with them sometimes inherent bias that might limit our opportunities. But CU Boulder's degrees are built on pure performance-based admissions. So there's no application, there's no standardized test score. If you're a busy parent or a busy professional, you don't have to dig up your undergraduate transcript. You don't have to find professors who remember you from 10, 15 years ago to write you recommendations. You start taking the content. If you can earn a B or better, you're in the degree and you're earning credit. And so it is a pure access-driven, autonomy to the student kind of opportunity that we wanted to provide for our students. And we're hearing from the students that are in both degrees how much they appreciate not having to spend maybe a year in the application process. You could actually go to one of our degrees and start earning credit this afternoon. That's how quickly it works. So we're very proud of that.
Thank you so much. So attendees, I have a few questions that I'm going to kick us off with, but we're excited to hear from you as well. So as we move forward with discussion, start thinking about the questions around online education and gender equity that you'd like to discuss with this group, and we'll address some of them in the second half of this conversation. So let's jump into the meat of our topic today. I'd love to hear from the two of you, and Quentin, maybe let's start with you this time, a little how you think online learning can help equalize gender disparities in higher education. We heard, some early thoughts on that and describing the programs that you lead, and I'd love to go deeper.
Well, gosh, look, I'm a mom. And when I was a professional an early professional in the early 90s, one of my very first mentors kept it a secret that she was a parent in her professional career, or even that she was married. And so the idea now that we have access to online education and that we can be mothers and if we choose not to be mothers, that's okay too, but that we can have professional careers, but don't have to divide ourselves to go to campus or give up different priorities that we might have in life is a wonderful thing. I remember when I was in the PhD program, it was a campus-based program, but I was sitting there one morning making pancakes for my daughters while I was doing research on my laptop at the kitchen island. And that kind of flexibility is what empowers women to really achieve what their goals are and still be able to manage their lives in a reasonable, realistic way. So online education is just such a gift, and it's just something that I believe really passionately about. I'll turn it over to Brooke.
Yeah, I mean, and I agree with everything that Quentin said. So, whenever we think about access, and I'll just share a story. We have a social media platform that all our students participate in, and they share out stories all the time. And, one picture that really stuck with me, one of our students posted, and she was participating in a live session in her daughter's bed while putting her daughter to sleep, right? And it just, like, it's so impactful because she's transforming our life. She's transforming her daughter's life, who she's laying down next to in bed. And she wouldn't have been able to pursue that type of education without this kind of flexibility. For us, we run weekly live sessions, but they're optional to participate in. They're all recorded and posted within an hour. And so you can consume that content from anywhere. And we always say like planes, trains, and automobiles. And we have stories of, students consuming our content in that way. The other thing that I think for online education where it breaks down gender barriers is in actually the way online education, the way we deliver it. So imagine, you're in a classroom and it's extremely engaging, but the way that you can participate is, again, back to Quentin's point, without bias. A lot of times women are put in a position where they have to fight over a very vocal male who has a strong opinion, and women tend to be less confident. It's documented from a research perspective. And so they won't speak up. But an online environment allows you to have that face-to-face interaction with a faculty member and to share your opinions freely without having to fight for airtime. A lot of what we do also in the online space, we use breakout rooms a lot. And so you can go into breakout rooms, you're able to share your opinions freely. And many times that gives also women the confidence once they've shared their opinions freely in that breakout room to come back and share it with a larger group. Again, when you don't have to fight for airtime. So I just think the delivery mechanism in and of itself and the way that we engage breaks down some of those gender biases that we see in traditional residential education.
And I would continue to build on that. The degrees at Boulder are chunked by content. So it's roughly 1 credit hour of classes that you're taking at a time. So it makes it very manageable. You can always enroll in more than 1 course per term if you want to. And then all of the material is delivered asynchronously so that working professionals, moms, whomever can fit in their learning when they can. Brooke, I just love that vignette that you gave us of the mother putting her child to bed while she's participating in a live session. And I think a lot of our message too is you can be who you are. You don't have to repress or give up your commitments to your family. You can own that and also own your ambition at the same time. And that is the beauty of the programs that both our schools offer.
I keep having the urge to go here after your comments. One other element that I'd love to add on the confidence piece is when I've had the privilege of meeting some students in the IMBA program, something that I've heard is, for many of us who've been out of higher education for 15 years, 20 years, there can be a real confidence gap about like, do I remember enough? Do I have the time to do this? Do I have the ability? And for all of the programs that we've been discussing, the ability to take open content without an application, even just watching the videos for free, can help people build that muscle of like, yes, I can carve out time in my life for this. Yes, I can succeed. And I think, for anyone who's been out of higher education, but particularly for women who can be harder on themselves than men, it can be really powerful in giving people the confidence to be like, yes, I can apply and go on to succeed in this degree. Without even applying, I can prove my ability to succeed in this material and go on to matriculate into this degree.
So if I could just build on that, and I'm sorry for jumping in, Brooke, but this just resonates so strongly with me. It was 17 years between my master's degree and my entry into the PhD program. And you think that literature stays the same, but it doesn't. The entire field had changed. And then I went to the first meeting of the graduate students, and the associate chair for graduate studies had her 10-year-old there. And I thought, oh my gosh, these students have gotten younger and younger. But even meeting my counterparts who are in their 20s and just whip smart and, just incredibly nice. But as a mother going in and thinking, can I still do this? Do I remember how? And one thing I want to say is, yes, you can build your confidence in the non-credit content. And if you need to, you should do it and you should avail yourselves of that. But my message to you is believe in yourself. You can do it. You still have that muscle. And in a lot of ways, even coming back later is a little bit of an advantage. I mean, my children's science fair project was always more important than any paper that I was doing. And it sort of helped me keep everything in perspective. So it turned out to be an advantage.
This is actually a great segue to the next question I wanted to ask, which is, on a little bit of a more personal note, both of you balance a lot in your day-to-day lives. Brooke, I have a vivid memory. So I have a 4.5-year-old daughter, and I have a vivid memory of seeing you at one of our Coursera conferences. I think it was actually the one hosted at Boulder, where we were in a series of intense sessions and meetings about the future of online education. And then I saw you outside during a break, FaceTiming with your kids. And my own daughter was 6 months old. And for me, it was a really lovely moment in seeing a model of someone pursuing such interesting and important work and also clearly prioritizing being a parent. So for both of you, both personally and when you give advice to colleagues and students, how do you talk about approaching balancing work, studying, taking care of kids, other parts of life?
Yeah, it's a great question, and thanks for sharing the anecdote as well. I'm not gonna lie, it's hard. And I try not to use the word balance, because balance in my mind, I have like this picture of someone's like everything's perfect in balance and everyone's happy and there's an equilibrium, right? And that positively is not the case in my life. I talk about triage. And so I think about it like an emergency room and how am I going to triage the priorities that I have. And it's a trade-off. I'm very ambitious, but from a priority perspective, I do prioritize myself and my career ambitions, but I also prioritize my family and my entire family unit, my kids, their responsibilities. And then sometimes I actually prioritize myself outside of like the professional me. A lot of times when I do an introduction, I'll put up a picture and I'll say, there are 3 me's: the professional me, the just me, and then the me with kids. And so I'm always trying to balance those things. I think in the way I think about it is every day I try to be excellent at something, but I'm never going to be excellent at all 3 of those things each day. So some days I'm an excellent professional. And it may mean that I don't have time for myself personally. And it may mean that from my priority perspective, my kids take a back seat. So the babysitter may have to drive them, to their events that day. But then other days, like I'm an excellent parent. But on those days, I'm maybe not the most excellent professional. And you just have to be okay with that. And I think if you think about your values and how you prioritize and you allow yourself guilt-free, which is, I think I really struggle with, and I know women really struggle with generally, but, allow yourself guilt-free to just recognize that and be very transparent about it, you can triage the set of priorities that you have.
I love this idea of triage. If that hasn't been my life for the last 23 years, I don't know what it has been. And Brooke, I don't know that I have too much to add to that, except I always say to women, there's more than one path to success. And a really good friend of mine who gave up a high-powered career in Washington, D.C. to move to a smaller town because their first child had some significant special needs that needed a lot of attention, said, you can define success differently. And I think part of defining success differently is giving yourself forgiveness and permission not to be the best at everything all the time, which is exactly what Brooke just said. It is okay not to feel like you're perfect and not to feel like you're perfectly serving everyone all the time, and to have confidence that what you're building over time is actually something beautiful and perfect. And I even got to a point where I was talking to a lot of my support group about potentially resigning from the PhD, because I was struggling so hard with what my children needed and what I could provide, and if I was being a good enough mother, and if I was being a good enough family member. My husband is a great co-equal partner in our relationship. And what I really came down to was, no, I am setting an example for my children. I am showing them what is possible, and I'm teaching them that they are important too, and that their goals are important too. And so just give yourself permission to not be perfect. No one is perfect. We're all triaging all the time, no matter what we have going on in our lives. And then it all turns out to be a beautiful tapestry in the end. And it's really rewarding to do it.
I am so glad personally, and so many people in the world are glad, Quentin, that you did not quit your PhD program. Taking that same question from, rather than a personal, like a societal lens, are there thoughts that on your mind about changes in US society and potentially education that you think should be of high priority to reduce gender inequities.
Yeah, I can start here. I mean, I have given this some thought. You know, I don't, in at least the US, the government is not particularly supportive of women in the workforce. And I think there have been, you know, some changes around parental leave. And I know actually Coursera has a great parental leave policy. But I think Coursera is a bit of an outlier, even in kind of surprisingly in higher education, the benefits that are provided to women who work in higher education within university systems are not that strong. And you know, it's not just about parental leave. When I think about what's necessary, even for many of the women in our program, they are working professionals. They have kids, a lot of them at home, and they're trying to invest in themselves. And what's necessary, they need affordable education, which we provide, but a lot of times they need resources to be able to outsource some of the other daily tasks, like doing the laundry, right? Groceries. I mean, some really basic things that I think some are very fortunate. Like I'm in a fortunate position where I can outsource a lot of that labor, and I do, because it's a trade-off between doing the laundry or spending time with my kids. But most women are not in that position. And I do believe that's a place where, you know, the government could really step in and provide benefits beyond just traditional education benefits, which a lot of companies provide, and parental leave benefits, which are anywhere from, you know, 4 to 12 weeks, which really is not a sufficient time for an individual to also choose to invest in themselves.
Quentin, anything to add?
I agree completely. And then also just valuing the role of parenting for men and women more and more in society. I think we're focused on women in this conversation, but let's not forget whomever our partners are, whatever gender they are, that if you have a partner in parenting, creating a space for families to be valued and to have room and priorities in people's working lives is just really important as a society, to build the fabric of society for what comes next. So I think it's everyone that we need to take care of, but then of course all the inequities that Brooke was speaking about in terms of women. I don't have anything to add to that great answer.
I know for myself personally, after becoming a parent, and here again, like I was in a very privileged position, but for me, not only was my parental leave really impactful, my husband was able to take a parental leave. And that was really amazing for me in being able to restart my career while adjusting to how life changes when you're taking care of a small human. So I'm going to ask one more question here, and then we have some awesome questions coming in from the audience that I'm excited to shift to. But my last question is, I want to quote from Coursera's recent global skills report about online learning trends on Coursera, and maybe someone on my team could potentially drop that in the link in the chat if anyone's interested in it. So I'm quoting here, over 1.8 million fewer women were in the US workforce in March 2021 compared with February 2020. However, in that same time, the share of overall Coursera course enrollments in the US from women increased from 42% in 2018-2019 to 55%, over half of total enrollments in 2020. And over the same time period, the share of STEM course enrollments for women grew from 35% to 47%, close to half. As the world recovers from the crisis, this points to a trend where online learning is helping level the playing field for women by giving them access to job-relevant skills. So I know for you two, this is not a surprise, but I'd love to hear your reaction to this finding and factors that you think might be playing into this trend.
Well, look, we all know at this point that the pandemic had an increased impact on women, and women as caregivers who are bearing the burden of having children in the home and trying to work, and just general exhaustion. And again, I want to acknowledge all of our partners in this process too. I think everyone's exhausted, but women have borne the burden, and with the disappearance of in-person daycare, it's a tremendous economic issue. Women have been fighting for decades in the United States and continue to fight around the world for equality and economic mobility. And this has the potential to be a decades-long impactful negative result on our ability to be mobile and autonomous in our society. So I think it's very serious. And yet I think the numbers on Coursera showing that women are increasing their engagement on the platform and increasing their engagement in STEM fields gives us promise and hope, right? It's a countervailing force of women saying, okay, I'm now going to take control of my destiny and use the tools that are provided to me in this great new online field and really reconfigure myself and maybe think about a new career and maybe upskill and move on to a more economically rewarding career that really acknowledges what I bring to the workplace. So that's my hope, is that ultimately we come out of this in a field of optimism and more economic mobility and autonomy. Brooke?
Yeah, and I mean, I echo what Quentin says. You know, I do think the pandemic has had an inordinate effect on women, and many women were forced to leave the workforce because there was no in-home daycare, there was no in-person school, right? And they were forced to make that choice. And so you see a lot of women leaving the workforce, but I mean, I applaud women generally because you can see through the data what they chose to do, right? If they were going to be at home and providing that care for their children, they were also making a choice to invest in themselves. And it's only because, you know, I think of the availability of accessible online education through Coursera and Coursera partners. I mean, if you go back 2 decades, right, that option wouldn't have been there. And so the women wouldn't have had that ability to invest in themselves. And I've spoken with some women in our IMBA program. Many through the pandemic were forced to choose between work and continuing to pursue the MBA. And many of them chose to leave work because they knew the investment that they were making in themselves coming out of the pandemic would be well worth it. And it's a brave decision to make, right? And a very difficult decision to make. But I think women recognize, I think, the issue, and they're doubling down on themselves in terms of education, which I love to see, right? It's a great bet.
Yeah, in a lot of challenging news about trends related to women and the workforce during the pandemic, this feels like a ray of light in that people committing to their future. So let's move. We're getting some great questions from the audience. Thank you all. So one of our audience would like to hear for both of you. Do you teach traditional in-person classes at your respective institutions? And how has your experiences teaching online shaped your teaching during the pandemic, if you have been teaching during the pandemic?
So I haven't been teaching during the pandemic. So Brooke, do you want to? You haven't been either?
I haven't been teaching during the pandemic either.
And I know for a fact that both of these women have very busy jobs without teaching. So but I think we can reframe this question as, sure, you know, how has your understanding, your experiences teaching online shaped in-person teaching in general? And I know many of you, for the faculty members in your programs, talk about this a lot too.
I'm happy to jump in and talk about my experience creating a MOOC on Coursera. So I don't even remember how this came about, but I got to go visit Coursera. I think it was about 2014 or 15, and do an educated training with a faculty member who was interested in doing a course. And I was teaching writing, English literature, and business writing at the time. And I went to Coursera and I was learning about concepts that are a little bit more common to all of us now, but this idea of modularizing your lessons and that the average video link should only be 4 minutes. And I'm thinking, well, but I'm very interesting for 45 minutes. How can I possibly condense my brilliance into 4 minutes? And then I started thinking about the rigor of the Coursera platform like a sonnet. So Shakespeare is incredibly brilliant within the forms and rules of a sonnet, iambic, pentameter, and rhyme scheme. And so what if I approached the Coursera platform like a set of rules that provided a scaffolding that I needed to try to be brilliant within. And could I teach something like writing in this new format, which seemed completely alien to me? And how would I do that if I weren't actually grading and providing my pearls of wisdom to my students? So I tackled that as a creative problem, and it reformulated everything that I do in the classroom. And I took that modularity and a little bit more humility back into the classroom, and started really empowering my students more and more, because what I've seen in the MOOC is that students have all the capabilities that they need. And I've always thought about my role as a teacher as really showing my students how smart they are. And what it turns out to be, the more power I give to my students, the more power they accept and internalize for themselves and begin to change their lives. So it was a transformative, wonderful experience. And I still hear from students to this day. And it's just one of the most rewarding things that I've ever done.
Yeah, and just to really just add on to what Quentin is saying, I think one thing that's you'll see when you move from residential education to online and then back to residential, you really start thinking about the value add. Like, what value do I provide as an instructor or as a professor, and how can I change that value add, right? We want to maximize the value that we offer. And even though as academics, we tend to like to hear ourselves talk, you can condense it to really high quality video content that the students love, because they can watch it again and again and again, right? They don't just get to hear you one time. And then the time that you spend, whether it's online, right, in a Zoom session or a breakout session, or whether it's in a traditional classroom on campus, that can be spent in a very different way. And a lot of times it's spent focused on, in a business setting, on application, right? So we go through cases, we go through problems, we have discussions. And so there's much more time for what we generally refer to as experiential learning whenever you take the lecture component out. And that's one thing that online education really pushes. And so I think there's a huge benefit to teaching in both formats.
The other thing I learned too is how serious my students are. And I teach a non-credit course, and some of my quiz questions early in the course are open-ended. So you can get credit for the quiz question no matter what you type in. And initially my students were really angry at me for making it too easy for them. And so I had to create communication pathways for them to say, look, if you're becoming a writer, this is the kind of independence you're going to have to assert. And actually by the end of the course, there are a lot more of these open-ended questions where I'm asking them to apply active voice or whatever. And so it was so fascinating to me. I've always believed in my students, but now I have data that says, look, our students care about learning, even in a non-credit experience. I think we do so often our learners such disservice when we assume that they're distracted or they don't care about their learning. It's my job to create an environment where they do care about learning and to give them that ability. So I took that very strongly also back into my classroom.
Thank you so much. I'm definitely going to repeat the anecdote that Quentin compared teaching online to the sonnet form. So we have a couple really interesting questions here on empowering women with content and representation in faculty members, which can be, and the question here is framed around women, but I think this also can really apply to underrepresented minorities and other groups who are not white men. So I'll read a question from Shannon. Do your online programs involve women faculty members? Yes. But in general, how do you think about how female role models can help learners feel the content is more relatable and provide confidence? And how do you bring that into the programs you lead?
Yeah, I mean, positively, we do have women faculty in our programs, but not near enough. And it's really, and I can speak, and I think it's similar for Quentin, but from a business school perspective, women are underrepresented in business schools. And as you move through the ranks from an assistant professor to an associate to a full to leadership, women are like less and less represented, right? So university system is no different than what we see right outside of a university system. I believe that having women in those roles is critically important to showing other women, right, that they can gain that skill, that they have that confidence. when I think about my own path, there were very few women that I saw doing what I wanted to do with the same responsibilities. And that makes it really, really hard, because you do start to question whether, well, is this for me? Can I do it? I work very hard as a leader in our program to bring more women from the College of Business into the IMBA program. But you also be very cautious. It's difficult for women to be promoted. Teaching an online course requires a big investment. And so I know that it's going to take a significant amount of time away from research productivity, which they need to invest in to be promoted, right? And to rise through the ranks. And so it really is a university and a college level problem that we take very seriously in the Gies College of Business. You will see in this next year, at least 2 women, me included, will be present in our IMBA program. And then my friend who's an underrepresented minority woman as well. And so we're making some change, but not at the rate that I would like. And I really believe, for us, when you look at the percentage, we have 32% women in our IMBA program, which is fine, but it's not outstanding. And I think the path to changing that is through more women representation amongst our faculty, in our cases, in our course materials, right? So that you see strong women leaders. And that's something I'm actively working towards.
I completely agree with everything that Brooke has said. And I'm just reflecting on some of the role models that I was so privileged to have, go before me in all of my career spaces. And then the other piece of this is we're kind of proud at Boulder that we have an all-female staff and a faculty director for the MSDS. And she's just phenomenal. And so that's been really fun. But I do agree, you have to be able to see yourself to know to succeed. And the only thing I would add then to what Brooke said is as we women show up in the workforce and break these glass ceilings and begin to infiltrate the upper echelons, I think mentoring is really important, and mentoring and validating the female experience. So much of my journey was fraught with insecurity and self-doubt. And now that I'm more mature, I realize how misplaced that self-doubt and insecurity really was, and how it would have been so useful for me to have someone tell me along the way, you're doing fine, you can speak out. I'm an introvert. I know you don't believe that listening to me today, but it took me a long time to find my voice. And I think we as women have to help each other and have to help those who are following behind us to find their voice, find their power, figure out how smart they are, and figure out how much they really do have to contribute. It's already there. It's just a matter of recognizing it.
That was another here moment for me. I think you are enough, you are doing great. And if you have a misstep, see what you can learn from it and carry that forward, and don't dwell on it. And that's hard for many people, and particularly hard for many women. Brooke, we have a question for you. Do you, as you think about those 3 U's, it's necessary to separate those 3 U's? Have you ever wanted to integrate them? And how would you go about doing so if you wanted to?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. I do integrate them every day, right? So, in the morning when I get up and work out, I'm just the me alone, right? Then I go to work and I'm the professional me, and then I come home and I invest in my kids. I think it's a really personal choice, right? I think you have to think about what you value. I've done a presentation before. They're actually from a research perspective, there are 2 types of individuals: separators and integrators. And so, you can think about how you separate tasks and whether you fully integrate tasks. I remember as an assistant professor, as soon as I had my first child, my son, I would drop him off at daycare and I would literally pretend the rest of the day I didn't have a kid. That's the only way that I could deal with it, because I felt so bad about leaving him, but I really wanted to invest in my career, and just mentally that's what I did, right? But it's a very, very, it's a very personal choice. But I know for myself to be happy, to be kind of the best version of me, and the best version of me for my professional team, and the best version of me for my kids, I need to invest in myself professionally, myself personally, and I need to invest in my family, because those are the 3 things that I value.
We actually got another related question, Quentin, that I'm going to ask you for a different angle on that. I will say, our audience, thank you for these amazing questions. We're definitely going to have a bunch of good questions we don't get to. I also wanted to remind you, if you could use the Q&A function rather than chat, it's easier for our team to make sure they're surfacing the questions to us. So Quentin, a related question to the one Brooke just answered from Rima. There's an interesting question that says, to be good at something, you need to choose 3 of the 4 choices. And to be great, you have to give up 2 of the 4 choices. I'm not totally sure this is true, but I'd love to hear, I'm looking forward to hearing your thoughts. The 4 choices are work, family, health, and leisure hobbies. How do you think about that? Do you buy that framing? And if so, how do you prioritize?
No, I don't buy that framing. Gosh, where do I go from here? I feel like I'm a mom. My children are grown. It's the empty nest has something to be said for it. I miss them terribly and love it when they come home. But I think giving yourself permission to be in different places at different stages of your life is very important, and not to, as we were saying earlier, not to be a perfectionist at everything. But I work out. I think Brooke does too, almost every day. I'm a martial artist. I'm a 4th degree black belt. I love kickboxing. I go do that for my own sanity and even temperament. I'm a mother. I'm deeply involved in my children's lives. I'm a professional. And I think you can integrate them all. It is really about giving yourself permission to be perfect at moments, but not all the time. And to realize that all of it builds together into your whole person. And then it also just has to be about your values. So if these aren't your values, then don't feel obligated to follow the path that Brooke and I happen to have chosen for ourselves. I think that's also really important. And especially women, we are buffeted by so many preconceived notions and societal norms, and it can be very difficult, or at least it was for me. Maybe it's not that difficult for all of you out there, but it was very difficult for me to decide who I was and to figure out who I wanted to be. And I mean, it's been a 50 or so year journey, I suppose. But staying true, understanding those values and then staying true to them, I do really think that you can choose your buckets that you want to invest in. So I'm sorry, Rima, to disagree with you. And I hope it's helpful.
If I may, I'd actually love to add my own framing on that, which is like, yeah, you can't pour your entire self into all of those buckets. There isn't that much of yourself to go around. And for me, like work and family are like the 2 at the top right now. And health and hobbies are not getting quite as much time as they used to get in my 20s. Like I'm not training for any major athletic events. I'm not pouring myself into some of my hobbies in the same way I used to before I was a parent, but you can get enough of those in your life to, prioritize that, the just me and feed that part of yourself. And then, maybe again in a future chapter, like I will pour more of myself into those areas that are kind of the just enough right now, not the, not my entire self. I think we'll have time for 2 more questions, maybe. We have one from Christine that I think is really interesting. I already have a master's degree. In your opinion, what is the next step for continuing education? So I'd love to hear about your thoughts for people who have already have significant educational accomplishments, but are still looking to make progress in their lives.
Yeah, I think
you want to go ahead, Brooke.
Sure. I mean, Quinn and I both very much believe in lifelong learning, right? And access to that learning. And so I think the old conception that you get an undergraduate degree, and if you're going to pursue further education, you get a graduate degree and maybe a PhD, but outside of that, like there's nothing else to learn. Like that's a really old notion. I would encourage, it depends. Like you can, if you want to learn just for your own, because you love to learn, I love to learn, right? So I'm always learning about something new. Some of it I don't intend to use to change my career path. I love the path that I'm on. I know a lot of other professionals, and particularly those in our programs, they're very interested in continuing their education with Geese. We offer campus graduate certificates or graduate certificates, which I know Boulder does as well. We have a lot of different non-credit offerings, which allow you just to continue to build your skill set. So, if you finish, I'll just give an example. We have an online Master's of Science in Accountancy program. If you finish your master's degree in accounting 10 years ago, probably analytics was not a big part of that degree, but it's a huge part of any degree that's offered now in that space. And it's critical for you to be successful in that profession. And so I think there are always opportunities, even if you hold a graduate degree, to come back and learn a new skill that will help you either personally, because it's just gratifying, or actually help you to advance or pivot your career.
Yeah, I completely agree with Brooke. And Brooke, I'll let you correct me if I'm wrong, but I would also argue that our programs on Coursera are built specifically for professional audiences. And when we built the electrical engineering degree in particular, which was our first degree, and then the data science degree followed, we knew that a lot of engineers already have a master's degree, and yet the need for professional education continues for your life, especially in STEM fields. I mean, I was shocked at how much the English canon had changed when I went back 17 years later. I can't imagine how much STEM fields are changing, now minute by minute practically. And so our degrees are built so that you can come in and either pick up new knowledge in a non-credit format, or if you want a credit-bearing transcript, you can come in and curate the experience you want. So embedded systems in the field of electrical engineering didn't exist 20 years ago, but now it's literally embedded everywhere. And so you can come in and either take a few credit hours on Bluetooth to upskill that way, or take a graduate certificate in embedded system design, or get a whole second master's degree. I would argue that a lot of adults don't want a second master's degree and don't need to make that kind of a commitment. So we designed all of our programs on Coursera to offer this lifelong learning experience so that you can professionalize and get the experience you want. And Brooke, I don't know if you want to add anything about the IMBA or other programs at Illinois.
No, I think you're right. I mean, that's how we think about our content as well. I mean, all of our courses, you can take a single credit-bearing course, or you can take a specialization, right? If you want to focus in a certain area, you don't have to come back and finish the complete degree. And I know a lot of our alums do that. They'll continue to, as we add new courses, because we're always offering new content that's kind of the latest and greatest in the field. And so, no, I wholly agree.
In this conversation, we've taken a little bit of a U.S. perspective on the conversation, which is where all of us work in a global context, but based in the U.S. And we've had a couple questions for a more global take on some of these questions. So from Nibras, hello, I'm from Iraq and one of the members of the Ministry of Higher Education in Iraq and currently a PhD student. Do you have advice that can be adopted in our country so that women have a distinct role in higher education? That's a specific question, but there's also a general question about, international perspectives on some of the challenges of gender equity in education.
Well, I know that I hear from a lot of my students on the Coursera platform that just access to education and the global reach of Coursera is already creating a lot of gender equity. I've also spent some time in the United Arab Emirates talking to incredible professional women there who they are so vibrant and so full of promise and so looking towards the future. That again, building our networks even across the boundaries of our fractured world are so important. And so having support networks that you can develop, if that's either in your own country, in your own locale, or reaching out to people like me and Brooke across the world for support, I think that is a key place to begin. And Brooke?
Yeah, and I agree, and I recognize. I mean, I tend to have like a U.S. centric mind when I talk about these topics, and I realize when I say like we provide access and affordable education outside of this country, $23,000 is not affordable access to education, and I realize that there are larger barriers. Sometimes it's cultural cultural barriers for women to pursue education. I mean, it's one reason that we originally chose to partner with Coursera, and we continue to very much value our partnership with Coursera because of the free access to education and very low cost access to education to learners all across the globe. I'm not sure how many languages, but our content is translated in many languages by Coursera on the Coursera platform. And so, it gives individuals all over the world access to content from the University of Illinois. And I'll echo what Quentin said in terms of, find other women who are passionate about providing education, reach out to other leaders, reach out to Quentin and I. I love what I do because I have an ability to impact individual lives through education. That's what my passion is, my professional passion. And so anything I can do to drive that, I put my whole self into.
Thank you both so much. To our audience, we'll hear some closing remarks from Brooke and Quentin, and to our attendees, we'd love to hear some of your closing thoughts as well. We know that many of you joined us today because you're thinking about your own educational future, and we'd love to know what's on your mind as next steps after hearing from the panelists today. We'd love to hear what you think in the poll the team will put up in a minute. So Brooke and Quentin, thank you so much for your time, your ideas, your wisdom today. As we wrap up, what's one takeaway that you hope everyone in the audience has after hearing our discussion?
Believe in yourself. You can do it. You have all the capabilities and talent that you already need. You just need to recognize it and share it with the world.
And mine's similar, have the confidence to invest in yourself. It will pay off, more than you can ever imagine, and impact not only your life, but your family's life and your family's lives to come. So just have the confidence, make the decision to invest in yourself.
Thank you, Brooke and Quentin, so much. Thank you to our audience from around the world, to those of you who are engaging with this late at night or early in the morning. I think someone just asked, yes, a recording of this session will be available if you want to share it. And we feel so privileged to have had this conversation with you today. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you.